Hi, Andy. I am. Can you hear me? Oh, okay, okay. Okay. I'm more nervous than I ever thought I would be. It's like, oh, I hope I don't disappoint you. Okay.
Hi, I'm Ronda Stevens. I'm on Q Talk, and I'm taking Q's place this week, but I promise you she'll be back next week. She's on the road back from Las Vegas, so she'll be back with you next week. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. She's asked me to be the guest instructor, or do a little bit of a demo and talk about some wire wrapping basics. I teach wire wrap design, basic wire wrap design, and some wire weaving and some wire and fire classes. So I'm very nervous. I know you can tell that my voice is a little shaky. I've not done this before, and Q's an expert on it. So just bear with me as I go through my little spiel about what I do and my website and everything, and then we'll get into some wire wrapping basics. My website is twistandturns.com. I have some videos, some PDF tutorials that are out there on wire wrapping, and I also have some free demos, and those videos are really good because it's going to go over a lot of things that I'm going over today, some of the basics of wire wrap design. And I'm also the co-owner of the Great Bead Escape Retreat. We just had our 11th annual retreat this past beginning of April, and it was a great success. Everybody had a good time. And so feel free to join the mailing list on either one of my websites, because on the Twists and Turns, I will send you information on the classes that are upcoming and my schedule. The Great Bead Escape, you'll find out when the classes will be listed on our website for the upcoming 2023 retreat. So I'll also be at Bead Fest in Lancaster in August. And I'll also teach at the William Holland School. It's a lapidary art school. I teach there in September and October. So those are all upcoming for me. But let's go ahead and get into the wire wrapping basics. I know that's what everybody's more interested in. I always like to say you can't do wire wrapping without proper tools. So what you really need to do is to get a good set of tools that are designed for working with jewelry metals. I know when I took my first class way back in 2000, it wasn't as easy to get all the different tools that it is now. You've got so many options now. I know Q on Urban Beater, she sells a lot of really nice tools, but it just wasn't back in the day. You just couldn't get all the nice tools. And I can remember my very first class, one of my co-students, she was all excited. She went to the flea market and she bought a nice set of tools for her wire wrap design class. They were all serrated and they all tore up her jewelry wire. So that's what if you invest in anything, invest in a nice set of tools. And it really is not that expensive. There's 3 basic pliers that you need for jewelry making: flat nose pliers, round nose pliers, and chain nose pliers. And the most important part on all of them, they're all nice and smooth, no serrations. You don't want anything damaging your wire. Okay. And I do love a very nice small wire cutter when you're dealing with your jewelry wires. I tend to use a lot of 20 and 21 gauge wires, and you need to be able to get in nice and close. Now, if you use a heavier gauge wire, you need a heavier cutter. If you start using 16 and 14 gauge wires, you're going to need a heavier cutter. But when you're using 20 and 21, these are a nice, small, close cutter. A good ruler. And I know this is going to sound real basic. Make sure you understand how to read a ruler. There's YouTube videos on how to read a ruler, and it's just important, because you need to get all the measurements down right for your different tutorials. A pin vise. It's an optional tool, but it does come in handy when you want to twist your square wire. Like you can see in this bracelet here, you see the second and the fourth wire. They're twisted. Okay, and I'll go over that in a few minutes on how to use that. A polishing cloth. Whenever I straighten my wire, I use a polishing cloth. I don't use the wire straightening pliers like these. You'll see a lot of people, they'll pull these out and they start straightening their wire. They're very aggressive, and if I'm using a dead soft wire, I'm using it for a reason. I want to keep it nice and soft. Oh, and I did forget to tell you one thing. if in anything that I'm going over, if you have a question, feel free to just type it up in the chat if you have a question. And Andy is helping me just like he does Q. So he's there to answer or relay your question to me, and I can slow down because I know I'm talking very fast. Like I said, I'm a little nervous. So that might slow me down too, is if you ask any questions and I can answer those. But we'll go back to the tools. Like I said, I use a polishing cloth. And tape is a really important feature as far as wire wrapping goes. It's a third hand, because when you're trying to bind your wires together with your half round wire, the tape's going to really be that third hand that's going to hold everything nice and neat for you. Okay. And one of the other little tools that seems it's a very simple thing, but you're going to mark on your wire. When you need to make wraps at certain areas, you're going to mark on your wire with a Sharpie. And all those marks come off with acetone or fingernail polish remover. So you don't have to worry about, you don't have to wear it off, or you don't have, I see people a year after they made a piece of jewelry with me, and I look at it and I said, you didn't take the marks off. I still see your marks. Oh, it's okay. Nobody else does. And I'm like, so take those marks off. All right. Whenever I start teaching a class, and especially if it's a lot of beginners, they've not taken a class before, one of the first questions, because they've done a little bit of research, they've gone out there and watched some YouTube videos, gauges and hardness of wire. They don't understand the different gauges, and they don't understand the wire hardness or temper. And I just want to show you real quick just an example of a 26 gauge wire. It's the smaller the number, the larger the wire. So this particular wire, that's smaller the number. This is an 18 gauge wire, nice and heavy wire, and I use it like to make this bracelet here. I use the 18 gauge wire. The beads still go on it, okay, but it gives me a nice thick piece that is going to maintain that shape. Even though I am working with a dead soft, it still hardens up nicely for me as I work it. But then this is your 26 gauge, a lot higher number but a lot smaller wire. And that's really great with some of the wire weaving projects. Like your base wire here is an 18, and then use the 26 to do the weaving. Okay, so every wire, there is a good use for it. You just need to understand when to use it and for what. Okay, so that's your wire gauges, and the majority, whenever a lot of my classes, I use a 20 and 21. It's because I use multiple wires. This is the one that I was looking at earlier, and there's so many wires here, but it's 20 and 21 gauge square wire. It's a smaller size wire, but because there's so many, I can get away with that. Okay, wire hardness. And I always like to show this particular bracelet as far as wire hardness goes. You have a dead soft and you have a half hard wire. There's also a full hard. Now, I've never used full hard. I can't see where I ever would. I use the dead soft a lot to be able to manipulate the wire, or the half hard because I want it to maintain its shape. Okay, the dead soft, see all the manipulation I'm doing is braiding wire. Now, I could have never done this with an 18 gauge wire if I'd chosen half hard. It would have just never been able to bend like that. Okay, but whenever I have these nice straight edges and I need this wire to be able to maintain its shape as it's being worn, that's when I use the half hard. Ear wires, I always use half hard on ear wires because you need them to maintain that shape as you're taking them, in and out of your ear. You don't want that flexing of dead soft. So you work with the half hard and it maintains the shape. Now, I purchase a lot of my wire from Rio Grande. I've used them for years, and one of the really nice things about them now is that they have all the different shapes, and the hardness is in copper, and that's a really, really a a great thing now, because I used to demo and everything in the sterling silver. So you've got 21 square half hard, you've got your round dead soft, you have half round, and I purchased 14 gauge half round from them, all in copper, and that's just a real nice thing to be able to buy an inexpensive wire that you can practice with but still get all your shapes. I know back whenever I first started wire wrapping, the only wire that came in shapes was your sterling silver and your gold filled. Granted, the wire was not as expensive as it is today, but still, that was you're trying to learn and trying to create new pieces in a precious metal, so it was a little expensive. So it's really nice that they do have that copper now. So let's go over some of the techniques now. When you're working with wire, one of the first things I say, whether you get it on a spool or whether you get it on a coil, you need to be able to straighten your wire. Now, I like to take my flat nose pliers, and you're going to grasp one end of your wire. Now, I'm straightening a piece of square wire. Now, it could be a piece of round wire. It doesn't matter. It's whatever wire you need to straighten. But you could not make a bracelet and do a good job on this bracelet if it looked like this. Okay, so you take your polishing cloth, use the white part of the polishing cloth. It'll clean it up, and as well as you can work it and straighten it. Now, you just work slowly. As I'm working this, and I'm going to take the cloth away so you can see my fingers, I can feel whether I'm pushing or needing to push in a certain area. See that little bump right there? I need to kind of work it in a different angle so I get this wire nice and straight. The one thing you don't want to do, and I've seen so many people do it, they do this, they do it really fast, and it's like making a curly ribbon. And they're like, mine didn't straighten, Rhonda. No, you have to take your time and work down the length of it and just get that major curve out and then get it nice and straight. And you do that for each of your wires, so that way you can use your tape and tape them together. And you will get better at this. I mean, it's an acquired skill too. It's not something just super simple that you're just going to be able to do immediately. So don't think that everything should just come natural. You do have to work at it. Just takes practice. And I'm just going to go ahead and straighten these 4 so that way I can go into the taping portion. Because you do just want to take your time on each of these. Okay. Now, this is square wire, so it's very important that all the square wires stay side by side. And there's something in wire wrapping, it's a term called on square. So when you keep this wire, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, see if my camera will stay nice and focused. I'm going to zoom in here. Now, if I let one of these wires, I'm going to try to get it on the diagonal, and that's not on square anymore. And you can see that sharp edge instead of seeing that nice flat edge sitting side by side. It's kind of hard to get it off square whenever you want it to be, but as you look down on it, you should be able to see all flat surfaces side by side, and you're going to start your tape right on your wire. Okay, don't let it overhang. If it overhangs, then sticky's going to touch sticky. It's going to be a bear to get off, but it's just not going to do the job that it needs to do for you. Okay, so I do take that off real quick. Start the tape right on the wire. Bring it all the way around. Press it each time. And now the object is you want these wires to be perfectly side by side. You don't want to tape where they're just, I mean, this is the way I catch some people trying to tape in class, and they leave the big long piece of sticky and they put another piece further down, and that's doing you no good at all. It's just a waste of your time to attempt to tape like that. Just take your time. I had one lady, I have a couple of books, they're out on Amazon, And when she received my second book, she said, I opened the book up just so and all I could see was green tape. Well, because that helps you do your work properly. She never would tape properly. She always taped very sloppily. And so it never did her any good. And it would also just give her more trouble than it did help. Okay. So you noticed I wrapped it 2 or 3 times around, pressing each time. Notice I leave a little tab. I'm going to fold it back just on itself. Okay. And that's just going to be able to help me later on to be able to remove that tape very easily. I'm going to tear off a couple more pieces. So I'm just going to go through this as I would if I was making a bracelet. I run my fingers down it, making sure my wires are side by side. And a lot of my instructions, I tell you exactly where I want you to tape. For this demo, I'm just taping every few inches. Just so you can watch me taping my wire. And it is just as important as everything else. Yeah, the tape's going to be removed later, and it's not part of the design, but it will certainly help you do a much better job in your wrapping. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to take some 20 gauge half round, half hard wire. See if I can find it here. Okay. Now, when I wrap, I like to wrap with half hard wire because dead soft, and for lack of a better term, the dead soft half round is mushy. And I know that's probably not a good term to use for wire, but it doesn't stay in place. It's when you press it down, it just tends to wobble to one side or the other. Where the half hard, it just has a very good feel to it. Okay. Now, half round wire is flat on one side. It has a dome on the other. I like to tell people it's like a piece of round wire that's been sliced in half. So you have that nice flat edge. I say that edge looks like a razor blade. At least it does to me. With the round wire, the light rolls off of it. I'll see some people trying to look at the wire straight on like this and try to see it from there. And you can with some of the wires, but it's just easier to learn that nice flat area. Now, when you wrap, you hold the wire in your non-dominant hand. Whether it's right or left, you hold it in your non-dominant. And always hold your pliers in your dominant hand. You're going to take the tip of your flat nose pliers. And when I first started wire wrapping and when I first started teaching wire wrapping, I teach differently than the way I learned. When I learned to wire wrap, it was to grasp the smallest, tiniest bit of wire in your plier and make a hook. And when I started teaching it, that was the hardest thing for people to learn how to do, was to wrap well with half round. So I'm like, it's okay if you waste a little bit of wire. Make yourself a nice hook, bend it all the way over until your plier touches on the other side, okay? And now watch how I pull this wire slightly off to the right, because I'm right-handed. If you were left, it would be to the left, okay? Never let the wire leave that left hand. Hook it on your wire bundle, and you're going to grasp the wire with that plier, and you're not in your own way, okay? See how I'm able to lift my wire, and whenever I wrap, I will not be in my own way on the back. But I'm able to hold the wire with my plier with that piece that I went off to the side. Okay, I'm going to bring it all the way around. The object of wrapping with half round is you want those wraps to be right next to each other. Very important. Usually when you're just wrapping with just 3 or 4 wires, the base wires are only 3 or 4, your wraps are very easy to get perfectly side by side. But when you start wrapping with a lot more wires, like this number of wires, I'm going to show you a little trick that's going to keep those wraps right next to each other. I'm going to bring it all the way around. And if you will do this little offset, see how I'm pulling it back past the ones you've already wrapped? Then when you lay it down, it will force that wire to lay perfectly in place every time. And I also like to tell people, see that little hump? I think when you're wrapping with half round, it's very important that they're perfectly smooth. So you see how I just lifted that up, and now I'm going to repress, and I'm going to bring it around. That way all your wraps are just right. Always press between each set of wraps, so that way you could make a correction. Don't wait until you've wrapped 5 or 6 wraps and then come and press with your plier. Always press after each one. Okay. All right, now this little tab here, that's that little tail that I started with. I always like to pick it up, lift it, and pull it so it's all nice and neat also. And whenever you're doing this small of a group of wire, you cut it about halfway across. If you were doing a larger group, okay, I just like to use this for an example, you can see I don't trim it halfway across. It only goes over 2 or 3 wires, okay? You don't want to come all the way in the middle. If you leave those ends too long, they can lift up as you're wearing it, as you're opening it up and closing it, and it could lift up, and then it starts scratching your skin. You may know how to fix this, and because you've made it, you know how to go in there and fix this. But if you're selling your jewelry, if anything lifts up or starts being scratchy, other people don't know how to fix that. So you want to always have those wires settled and lay down correctly, so that way they don't lift up for your customer or for somebody you're giving a gift to. So I'm going to lift this one up slightly just so I can get these cutters in. And this is another thing about cutters. Never come into your wire tip down, because you're going to nip one of those wires. You're going to make one of those little scratches on your wires, and it could be deep enough that it could scratch people as they're wearing it. Always lay it flat. And when you trim, put your finger over. Make sure, don't cut too short, but it's just short enough that it goes over at least one of the wires and it folds down good. And notice that I'm using my chain nose, that I sit there with that very tip of my chain nose and I press and kind of roll inward. That way you can't feel that cut end. Okay, do the same thing here. That covering is because that long wire I didn't need to worry about, but I can promise you when you're trimming some of these square half hard wires and you're trimming off just a small amount, those wires will fly. You need to protect your eyes, you need to protect anybody around you, and you don't want it flying on and get on the floor because it's going to wind up in a bare foot. So tip of your chain nose plier, roll it down, make sure you can't feel it. A lot of people, whenever they're making their bracelets, and I'm like, you're not trimming your wires. Oh, I'll go back and do it. If you'll get them trimmed to start with, in case you do forget, you don't have to worry about coming back and trimming. But also, if you go ahead and trim, once you shape your bracelet, I go back and I check all those cut ends again, just to make sure everything's laid down the way it's supposed to. Now, I'm just going to go through that again real quick. Non-dominant hand holding the wire, dome side towards me, flat side away, tip of my flat nose plier, bend all the way over, cock it to the right, slip it on my wire, and make my wraps. And a lot of tutorials, it'll tell you how many wraps to make. And sometimes there's a really good reason, because measurements are determined from the end of a wrap or a beginning of a wrap. So it's really important to listen to the orientation. This is my bundle of wire here. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can talk about that as far as directional things go. If I was starting down here and I had a mark on my wire, and the instructions say that I need to wrap towards the center, that means I need to start at this line and I need to wrap towards the center of this bundle of wire. It's very important because the measurements for this end of this bracelet is determined where the start of that wrap is. So don't just think, oh, I can just put it anywhere or it's not a big deal. Especially if they tell you to do in a certain direction, it is for a reason. And it's usually based measurements and finding the center of something. And this particular bracelet, measurements were very important because there's a big center focal here that's created by the wire. If you did not follow the exact directions, you could have this focal area sitting over here to the side. Yeah, you would probably, you could wear it, you could get away with wearing it personally. Just don't ever flip your wrist over and show that the hook's way over here and the center part's over here. So, but you'd never want to put that on a table and sell it, okay? So that's basically how you wrap with half round. So I've gone over the basic techniques. Does anybody have any questions? Andy hasn't buzzed in my ear, so no. Okay, there's no questions so far. You know, and that's really, I know I've talked really fast through all this, so I'm not going to take up an hour. I do apologize for that. Like I said, I do tend to talk really fast. So I'm just going to give it just a few more minutes, and then I'm probably going to sign off. But I do want to remind you, Sulie Girardi is having a Zoom class on metal clay on April 30th. And you can register for that at urbanbeater.com. Let's see. And the link is also in this video. And the next Q Talk Live will be May 2nd, and Q will be back, and it's called Keep It Simple. So I know you'll be looking forward to that. And I would like to thank everyone for hanging out with me. And do me a favor and share this video and like this video and share it if it's helped you out some. And take care, and I hope you create something beautiful today. Thank you.